All right, this is Sergio Pinheiro. I am back with another edition of Fight Picks. This time I am joined by Makoa Goble, who writes for OT Heroics. We're here to discuss UFC 259. We're going to touch on the main card, but we're also going to go through the prelims, but we're not going to do the early prelims because if not, we'd be here till tomorrow. There's so many fights on this card. It's stacked. So we'll kick things off with the flyweight fight. Rogerio Bontorin versus Kai Kara-France. Obviously, everyone knows Kai Kara-France is. If you're a fan of this sport, you know Kai Kara-France is. Member of City Kickboxing. A serious gem there at 125 pounds. What's your thoughts on this fight?
I think it's do or die for Kara-France right now. I know he's coming off of one loss. It could be two. I think he's a really, really good-looking prospect, but I think he really needs to win here. And he's facing a guy that's going to be a serious challenge too. So,
yeah, I mean, Kai Kara-France is legit. I mean, he's very good, but the problem is he came in with so much hype, with the team behind him and the fact that he is so experienced when he entered the octagon. He has lost 2 of his last 3, but you look at those losses, they're Brandon Moreno and Brandon Royval. Like, he's losing to elite guys. And the Royval fight was one of the most exciting rounds we have ever seen. Back and forth. He almost finished Royval and then got finished himself. So it's an interesting one. And Bontorin is 16-2. He has 1 loss and is via submission. Or he has 2 losses. One of them is via submission. The other one's decision to Ray Borg. So very high level fight here. And I don't know which way I'm going to lean. But if I had to go one way, it would be Kai Kara-France. What about you?
I think I'll have to go with Kara-France as well, just because I've seen a lot more of him. I haven't seen too much about his opponent. And like you said, that fight he was in, that almost round of all time, I mean, that thing was amazing. So after watching that, I think we know exactly what Kara-France is going to bring to the table. He's going to be an extremely tough opponent. And is it his opponent's first UFC fight, or no? Is he 2-1 in the UFC?
I think he's 2-1 on the UFC, and he fought on the Contender Series as well.
Yeah. So 2 young prospects going at it, but I got Kara-France all day though.
And then we've got another huge flyweight fight. Joseph Benavidez, who obviously is coming off 2 back-to-back losses to the champ. A lot of people thought he was going to call it, after so many title attempts, not being able to reach. We were talking a little bit before this started about, he may go down as the best to never win a belt. But he chose to keep fighting, and he's matched up with undefeated Askar Askarov. Your thoughts on the fight, your thoughts on him coming back, and your prediction?
Well, I'm really hoping that Benavidez can turn things around. I think those 2 fights back to back with Figueiredo were pretty brutal to watch as a guy that was always rooting for Benavidez to get it done in those big title fights. The thing with Benavidez is it seems like if he's not in a title fight, he usually has a stellar performance. So I'm going to go with him here. I know he's facing a real killer, but I think Benavidez is really going to show that he's not done as far as his UFC career goes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Joseph Benavidez, if there's not a belt on the line, he wins. It's just that's kind of the story of his career. Askar Askarov has never lost. He has a draw, very close draw, but he has never lost. And it's really hard for me to go against a guy who has never tasted defeat. And on top of that, the fact that he's competing at the highest level while being deaf, to me, is mind-boggling. I know that's not going to play a factor into the fight, but I'm always going to lean towards these stories, and for me, that's just you can't write a script better than that. How awesome would it be if you were to beat Joseph Benavidez and win the belt? He'd be the first deaf person to ever do it. So for me, it's got to be, and it's got to be him. I have to, just for that reason alone, Askar Askarov.
Yeah, that is awesome. I mean, that guy, let me just say I'm impressed. I mean, I think anyone can really just be like, wow, when you think of that, because imagine not being able to hear and then going out there and fighting, because, I mean, hearing doesn't play too much of a role in fighting at all, but at the same time, that's a big sense that you're not having And I mean, he's still going through life, and he's doing something that probably not even 10% of people in the world could do. So, I mean, that kid is legit for sure.
And you just thinking about the fact that between rounds, you can't hear your corner, So, yeah, they're in front of you, giving you signals, but how much of that are you grasping? Especially if you're bleeding, if your vision's foggy. I can't imagine going through that. Matt Hamill did it, and I think Askar Askarov, with the win here, could surpass everything Matt Hamill's done, which is to me is remarkable. So Askar Askarov's story is incredible, and for whatever reason, I'm leaning his way just because of the story alone. And then we've got Kyler Phillips, who has the best hair in all of MMA, in my opinion, now that Brian Ortega got rid of his. He's fighting Song Yadong, who arguably lost two of his last two fights, but there he is. He's ranked, and both of them were actually wins. So I thought he lost both of them, but the judges saw it differently, and here he is ranked, and it's a huge opportunity for both men. For Song Yadong, he has to defend the top 15 ranking, and for Kyler Phillips, with a win over Song Yadong, you're ranked. So your thoughts on the fight, and who do you have?
Sorry about that. I think Kyler Phillips is going to get it done. I think on the feet, things will be pretty even. I just think Kyler Phillips is going to have that all-around game that's going to be needed to really – I think he's going to finish Song Yadong, honestly. I don't think this one's going to go to decision. I see Kyler getting it done with maybe a TKO or something like that, maybe kind of late in the fight, second or third round. What about you?
Yeah, it's a hard one for me because by the looks of it, if it goes to decision, no matter who wins, they're going to give it to Song Yadong, just historically. It's just like, well, then we're just going to give it to that guy. Kyler Phillips is a character, is the best way to put it. I mean, the guy's a sensei. You look at his my boy Joe Gravel is actually writing a piece on him, and he's hopefully going to get it out before the fight comes out, or before the fight happens. And I'm really hoping a lot of people will read that because it goes into depth about Kyler Phillips and his personality, and it's amazing. I love Kyler Phillips. I love everything about him. But Song Yadong is legit. I mean, the guy's ranked. I thought he should have been the one fighting Dominic Cruz, not Casey Kenny. Given the Team Alpha Male beef and everything, I thought that would have been a better fight. I really think Song Yadong could be a title challenger at some point. I think he's still young and he's got a long way to go. And I think Kyler Phillips maybe just not quite there yet. That being said, he's tough. He's durable. He's a definition of a mixed martial artist. So I really think Song Yadong is going to win it, and I think he's going to win it via decision. And I think it's going to be another close one, but I'm going to lean to Song Yadong.
It's fair. It's fair.
And then we've got another bantamweight fight. So like the entire prelims, not the early prelims, but the regular prelims are like 125 pounds, 125 pounds, 135, 135. Like it's very, very small. But that being said, this one's a huge, huge fight. It's monumental. Dominic Cruz is back. And for the first time in a while, we're seeing him in a non-title fight. Another long layoff for Dominic Cruz. These don't seem to affect him at all. In fact, he tends to perform better after long layoffs, and he's getting matched up with Casey Kenny. Your thoughts on the fight, and do you think that this is the right fight for Dominic?
Well, before he was matched up with Dominic Cruz, I was studying Casey Kenny and his tear through that division, and I was probably one of the first people aboard the hype train. That being said, I'm also a gigantic Dominic Cruz fan. I love the funky, unorthodox footwork. You know, I love his fighting style. I love his kind of chauvinistic, very intelligent attitude. And also as a commentator, I mean, he just gives you insight into the fight game that takes a whole lifetime to acquire. But with that being said, this is a fight. And I think for all of the knowledge that Dominic Cruz has, I think Casey Kenny is just going to show him why older fighters don't tend to do too well in the lighter divisions. I think Casey Kenny is going to be a lot faster than Dominic Cruz can handle. I think he's going to touch Dominic hard. And Dominic probably has best hopes of maybe if he tries to wrestle Kenny. I'm not quite too familiar on Kenny's grappling background. I'm sure he's pretty adept, just as everyone is as a UFC fighter. But on the feet, though, I'm really worried for Dominic Cruz. So, but I will say before I pass it over, I think it is awesome, though, that Dominic Cruz was talking in an interview I seen him do, and he was saying the reason that he wanted the fight with Kenny is because the Kenny is from the same town as him. And I just think that's awesome. It's almost like a passing of the torch almost. So I'm going to have to go Kenny. I think he's going to finish Cruz. Maybe, maybe not. I really hope not. But let's just say Kenny by a third round KO.
Wow, that's bold. I mean, Dominic Cruz is arguably the greatest bantamweight of all time, and you're going to say he's going to get knocked out by someone who's unranked.
That's me. I'm the pilot.
Yeah, it's bold, but I think right now Dominic Cruz is the underdog. So it's you're not the only one thinking that. I've been so back and forth on this because, like you said, Dominic Cruz is older in age, long layoff. Casey Kenny's got the momentum. I'm looking at their last fight, right? For me, I thought Casey Kenny lost to Nathaniel Wood. It was very competitive, but I thought he lost it. Obviously, Dominic Cruz lost to Henry Cejudo, but he looked very good against Henry Cejudo, and Henry Cejudo's the GOAT, he's Triple C, he's Olympic champion, he's all these things, but Henry Cejudo is legit and arguably one of the greatest lighter men to ever do it. And Dominic Cruz was winning points of that fight. So it's a hard one. And just based on their last fight alone, I would have to go with Dominic. I just think that he's had the stiffer competition. He hasn't fought someone like Casey Kenny in a very long time. Dominic Cruz has only fought elite fighters for the majority of his career. And Casey Kenny has never fought someone of Dominic's caliber. So if he can get past Dominic, he's proved me wrong. But for me, it's just the level of competition that they've had is so incomparable. And because of that, I have Dominic. But you brought up a lot of good points. He is older. Older older guys in the lighter weight class tend to fade. You're seeing it with Frankie Edgar, Uriah Faber, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a good point. It's a very good point. But there's also guys like Jose Aldo who are just, ageless wonders. So, who knows? Who knows where Dominic falls? And I can't wait to find out.
Same here.
And then we're going to jump into the main card. This fight is, for me, one of the craziest fights on the entire card. I don't see this one going the distance. Thiago Santos versus Alexander Rakic. Your thoughts?
I think it will go the distance. It sounds crazy because both of these guys are insane strikers, but I just have a feeling. I think that these guys are both really smart on the feet. They both really come from a kickboxing heavy background. So I think we're going to see a really technical fight here. I don't think we're going to see the vintage Santos destroying people, knocking people out. But I think he's going to put that experience to use here against Rakic, and I think he's going to outpoint him and get a decision win against him.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like another very good example was this past weekend. Jairzinho Rosenstrike versus Cyril Gane. No one expected that to go the distance, and it was 5 rounds, not 3, and still went the distance. So I think this can go one of two ways. One of these guys gets their head knocked into oblivion, or it goes to decision. And I don't know which way it's going. I mean, Thiago Santos hasn't looked good in his last 2 fights. He just lost to Glover Teixeira. And Alexander Rakic has been on a tear. So it's really one guy that's kind of on the downswing and the other guy on the upswing. And momentum is definitely leaning towards Rakic at this point in time. But if vintage Thiago Santos shows up, I think vintage Thiago Santos wins. So for me, it's going to come down to which Thiago Santos shows up. And for me, I really hope he does, because I love Thiago Santos. So for me, I'm going to go Thiago Santos. And part of that is just the fact that I'm a Thiago Santos fan. So I'm going to do Thiago Santos. I actually, I think you've convinced me that decision might be the way to go. Both guys are technical. They're probably going to be cautious, especially with Thiago Santos coming off back-to-back losses. He probably doesn't want to get tagged. So yeah,
Well,
I think decision.
Interrupting you here. I think that fight with Teixeira, that was really close. I mean, he almost had Glover this close to being finished. So don't sleep on my boy yet. I mean, you're not because you picked him, but it was a damn close fight. But that just shows how crazy of a fighter that Glover is to go through that storm that Thiago Santos brings and then finish him the way he did. So I'm excited. What do we got next, man?
Yeah, so now we're going to jump into a fight that's long overdue. Islam Makhachev is fighting Drew Dober. Islam obviously has been calling out everybody at the top of that division. And Drew Dober, since he kind of changed camps, he has looked like a man on a mission. He's looked like a completely different fighter. He was losing very close fights to guys like Nick Hine, and now here he is, steamrolling through the division, knocking out Alexander Hernandez, et cetera, et cetera. It's his career turnaround has been remarkable. Islam Makhachev is a different beast. How do you have this going?
See, I'm really going to have to go with Makhachev here. And people say that he's a better wrestler than Khabib is. And if that's true, I mean, we're really in for something here. And Drew Dober is no joke at all because, like you've been saying, he's coming in hot. He's had his rough times in the UFC, but he's shown that he can improve on his game and has what it takes to face elite competition. I think this is going to be a case of like when Holloway and Poirier fought for the first time. It was these two sharp prospects that didn't really have a giant name around them, but then you go flash forward years later and they're at the top of their divisions. I think this is going to be one of those fights that Islam Makhachev is going to go straight to the top, and I think Drew Dober is going to be right there close behind him. I'm going to have to go with Makhachev by submission. Let's say submission round 2. Let's go with it.
I like that. So this fight to me reminds me a lot of a fight that happened just a few months ago. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje. Right? You had a very, very high-level grappler, Russian grappler in Khabib, who's like the equivalent of Islam, and then you've got Justin Gaethje's training partner, Drew Dober. So it's like the exact same fight. Team Elevation has prepped for this fight already. It's the exact same fight, and they fell short in that one. So I wonder if they're going to be able to kind of learn the lessons from the last fight and apply it to this one. It's going to be interesting, and I think Drew Dober is a big 155er. He's big, he's thick, and I don't know if Islam Makhachev is going to be able to hold him down. But if he does, I think he can submit him. That being said, there was one fight, forget who it was, that he struggled in. Another grappler, Armenian, I forget his name. He's Arman Sarukian. Arman Sarukian almost beat Islam. And that's the fight that I'm zoning in on when I'm picking Drew Dober. I think Drew Dober can hold his own on the ground and make things interesting on the feet. So I think it's going to be a decision win for Drew Dober, and I think people are going to start understanding that Drew Dober is legit. And Islam Makhachev is he's coming off a long layoff, so that's something else to take into account. So it's interesting, and you went Islam, so I kind of had to go against it. You had to kind of have a little bit of both, so I went Drew Dober. And then we're going to jump.
I love that pick, and I think you're. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to jump into the title fights, but if you have something else to add, man, go for it.
I was just going to say, I think you're giving Drew Dober the respect he deserves because I really wanted to pick him, and that's kind of why I hesitated. But at the same time, just when you compare the camps, the Gaethje striking camp, Trevor Whitman, one of the greatest minds we have in the sport, but then you think of the camp that Khabib comes from and Makhachev comes from, and all of these other guys like Usman and all of them. And I'm talking Usman Nurmagomedov, not the welterweight champion,
Yeah.
but I think we're gonna see just another showcase of Russian Sambo and why it's really the perfect hybrid between like wrestling, judo, and jiu-jitsu. I think he's really gonna prove that the hype is real, and I'm talking about Makhachev, but we can move on now.
Yeah, I mean it's a good point. I mean both guys have a solid case. They both got a great background. They're both, and it reminds me a lot of the Khabib fight. And if it goes the same way the Khabib fight did, Islam wins. But I feel like Drew Dober, the fact that they prepared for this exact fight already is going to be is going to be the difference. They know what to expect because they've expected it before. They saw it before, and I think that's an interesting one. And I wouldn't be surprised if Islam gets it done, but I like Drew Dober too. So, yeah. And now we'll jump into the title fights. Triple header. This is ridiculous. Arguably the greatest card of all time. We've got 3 title fights. We're going to kick things off in the bantamweight division. Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling have been talking trash for about 17 years. It certainly feels that way. And Petr Yan, obviously coming out of one of the best striking gyms in the world, and Aljamain Sterling has been primarily competing at Extreme Couture and has looked remarkable. What he did to Corey Sandhagen was ridiculous. So it's an interesting one. I think it really just kind of comes down to where the fight takes place. What's your thoughts?
Well, I actually watched something I like watching Dan Hardy and his in-depth breakdowns, and he always really just eloquently explains things, and I have to agree with him. I don't always agree with him, but on this case, I will. And I think his point was that Jan just kind of has this presence inside the octagon to where his opponents don't really fight the way they've been known to, and it's something maybe with the intimidation factor, maybe with the feints, the way he kind of plays his lead hand, and he'll kind of grab at the hand and use that to set up his striking. But I think Jan can really get it done. I think he really can. If he can defend against that grappling from Aljo and force him to fight a kickboxing fight, I think Jan wins that 9 times out of 10, you know? But with that being said, if Aljo comes forward and he's loose and he's throwing his kicks and he's managing that distance and he's controlling that fight and he shoots in for a perfectly timed takedown and gets Jan to the floor, especially early, I think Aljo is going to submit him for sure. But if I have to pick one guy, I guess I'll have to go with Jan by decision, and I'll just stick with that.
Yeah, it's such an interesting fight stylistically because it's a classic striker versus grappler, and 9 times out of 10, it ends up being lackluster. But I feel like this performance isn't going to be that way. I really do think that neither guy likes each other. Aljamain Sterling isn't one to be hesitant. Petr Yan certainly isn't one to be hesitant. He took everything Jose Aldo had to offer and just kept walking forward. But I thought Jose Aldo looked very, very good in that fight as well. And I thought Aljamain Sterling looked the best he's ever looked against Corey Sandhagen. The way he dismantled him was ridiculous. I think Aljamain Sterling has been the best 135er we've seen in a very long time. He just hasn't had a chance at that belt. He had to pretty much beat everybody handedly and earn it. Petr Yan was kind of handed it almost. You beat Uriah Faber, Jose Aldo belt. Like it wasn't as impressive to me. So for me, Aljamain Sterling has had a much harder road. He's got a very, very good wrestling. His jiu-jitsu skills are ridiculous. His striking has improved drastically, leaps and bounds, working at Extreme Couture. So I have to go with Aljamain Sterling. But Petr Yan has, like you said, his presence. Like you watch him fight, and it doesn't seem like he's doing anything remarkable. But for whatever reason, fighters don't fight their fight when they fight him. They just don't show up. And it kind of reminds me of an early Conor McGregor. Like it's just guys get in there and they like freeze up. You saw it with Eddie Alvarez against Conor. It's the exact same thing. They don't fight their fight. And Aljamain Sterling, I don't think is going to be the guy that's going to go in there and be hesitant. I have Aljamain Sterling winning it. I think he submits him. And I don't know. I can't wait for this fight. I know they hate each other, so I can't wait for it.
I know it's going to be beautiful. And I really like and respect your pick too. And I can see your points because I really want to pick Sterling. But at the same time, I'll go with Jan because I think he's legit. And I think people are kind of sleeping on Jan because, like you said, he didn't really have to earn that. And we all know Aljo. He's been sitting in that division for a really long time now, and he's came straight from the bottom to the top, and he's earned it with fights. So he kind of is the uncrowned champ of that division. I think this is going to be a fight where we see Jan kind of control Aljo and maybe touch him up badly. And we've seen Aljo get knocked out before by great strikers, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point I was going to bring up too. I mean, he has lost. He has been knocked out. But in my opinion, that's the only fight he's lost. The other ones have been splits. He hasn't been defeated by anyone except for Marlon Moraes, who is also a very elite striker. Petr Yan is a very elite striker too. I just don't think Petr Yan possesses the power that Marlon Moraes does. He wears on you and he beats you up, kind of like Max Holloway, but he doesn't actually knock people out stiff. And I don't know, man. It's a fun fight. It's exciting, and I don't even know. I don't want to break it down anymore. I just want to watch it.
I know it.
And then we've got 100. Yeah. So next up we have
so I know it's like.
Yeah, there's like a slight delay there. So, but yeah, we've got Amanda Nunes defending her belt, 145-pound belt against Megan Anderson, who is probably her toughest striking test since Holly Holm. What's your thoughts on that fight?
I think Amanda Nunes has proven time and time again that no matter what type of style you put her up against, she will come in with the right game plan and she will use it to get her victory. I think in Amanda Nunes, we're looking at the person that we're going to talk about for a long time as being the greatest women's fighter in any combat sports, I think. I think we're probably biased because we're MMA guys, but I think she's really getting herself up there. And I think what she's going to do is Anderson, if she's starting to kind of touch her because of that range, I think we see Amanda start to wrestle. And I don't think Anderson's really going to have an answer for that because we've all seen how much of a dog Nunes can be no matter where the fight goes. So I'm going to go with Nunes by decision. I think it's going to be a lot like the Felicia Spencer fight. I think we're just going to see Nunes kind of prove that she's levels and levels above where her competition is.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that point. And I find Amanda Nunes, I wouldn't say fights to the level of her opposition, but she tends to finish the elite, but then just kind of wins against people that she's supposed to win. Like Raquel Penningtons, the Jermaine Durandamines, the Felicia Spencers, the Megan Andersons. So I feel like we're not going to see a finish, but I do think we are going to kind of sit back at the end of the night and be like, wow, she's legit. And that's what Amanda Nunes does. She just goes out there and overwhelms her opposition. There's one thing about Megan Anderson that makes me think that she could win this, and it's James Krause. The guy, is he bleeds this. Everything he does is MMA. And if anyone's going to be able to read Amanda Nunes and perfect and find the perfect game plan, it's James Krause. But that being said, it's not James Krause that's in the octagon. It's Megan Anderson. So one hard shot, one stiff leg kick, one of these things can kind of change all that. So for that reason, I am going Amanda Nunes. But I'm not counting out Megan Anderson. I think with the right game plan, she can go out there and kind of surprise Amanda Nunes, especially if she can keep it at range. She is long. She's very long. She's very big. But Amanda Nunes, how do you go against Amanda Nunes? Like at this point, we're just kind of trying to help Megan Anderson's case, but Amanda Nunes, like you said, is the greatest female combat athlete that's ever lived.
Damn right.
And then we'll jump into the last but not least, champion versus champion. We don't see these every day. Jan Blachowicz defending the 205-pound belt against Israel Adesanya. And Israel Adesanya just came out and said, don't be surprised if I show up 12 pounds underweight, which says he has not been beefing up for this fight. He's likely going to be taking it as a middleweight, which is remarkable. How do you have it going?
Man, this fight right here, I mean, it's the stuff, and the reason I'm such a big Adesanya fan, is because his whole rise to UFC stardom has really been kind of the stuff of movies. I mean, I always talk back to that Kelvin Gastelum in the beginning of the 5th round where he looks across the cage and he says, "I'm ready to die." I mean, if that doesn't show you how serious Adesanya is about his legacy and what he's trying to do in the UFC, then I don't know what anything will. And everyone always says mindset is like most of the fight right there. You know, like if you can perfect your mindset going into a fight, then you can kind of get your body to do what you want it to do. With that being said, as far as who's going to win the fight, it can be, I think it's like a 50-50 toss-up, because when you look at Jan Blachowicz, you see a guy that's kind of just like Amanda Nunes. He's a great striker. He's a great grappler. And on top of that, I'd say he even has insane clinch work. I mean, we saw what he did to Rockhold, coming out of that clinch, sleeping him with the punch. I mean, that's just the type of guy that Jan has evolved into. And I think that he's a good comparison with Amanda, because in the early parts of her career, she was getting beat by people too. And we weren't talking about her like, oh, this is Amanda Nunes, so great, but she turned herself into that. And I think Jan Blachowicz is kind of following that path ever since he found the noose. Shouts out to the noose. But he found the noose in the woods, and I mean, we saw his career change, and I think that's just a placebo effect, and that goes into his confidence. He's going into the cage fully confident, and I think that takes away any of the hesitation from Blachowicz. And I think on top of that, he's also been fighting a lot more intelligent fights. I think when we saw him get caught by Santos, it was because he was just rushing in all crazy, and he got caught. I don't think we're going to see that with Izzy. I think he's going to be technical, and I think he's going to be intelligent. And I'm hoping that he makes it an MMA game, an MMA fight, I should say, because that would be extremely I think it would be a lot more closer than it would be if he just stands there and kickboxes with Izzy, because I think that's when we're going to see the feints from Adesanya, the hip feints and the hand feints, and the way that he controls the distance and sets people up with all of his strikes. As far as my prediction goes, I'm going to say that Adesanya knocks him out in the 4th round. I think Blachowicz attempts to wrestle him and grapple him and maybe lands a few shots, and I think it's going to look a lot like the Kelvin Gastelum fight. I think Jan's going to put a lot of pressure on him to kind of get rid of that range advantage that Adesanya has. I think he's going to shoot in for some takedowns. I think he's going to try and clinch him. But I think Adesanya is going to be prepared for that. I think he'll get back up to his feet. He might take some damage. I don't think Adesanya will get submitted, because we've seen Jan submit people, but I think those are all, if you're Adesanya, that's what you're working on, right? The things that you're going to be worried about facing someone like Jan. So long story short, I think Adesanya beats him by using his feints to open up targets, and I think he'll prove that his accuracy combined with his power is the recipe for success for him.
Yeah, man, I like that breakdown, and it really is exactly how I had it laid out. It's the one thing that's interesting about this fight is you look at Izzy's last fights, it's when guys respect him that he goes out there and tees off on them. When guys come forward like Kelvin Gastelum did and showed no mercy, that's when things get exciting. Israel Adesanya, I know this is early on in his career, it's in kickboxing, but he's been knocked out before from guys who have a lot of power. Jan Blachowicz has a ton of power. So, I think it really comes down to, if you're Jan, if I'm Jan's corner, I say don't respect him. Get in there, take a hit. Take a hit. You've got more power than Robert Whittaker, and Robert Whittaker landed some shots. You've got more power than anyone that Izzy's fought, with the exception of maybe Yoel Romero. And you saw how he fought Yoel Romero. He was hesitant, right? That is how you win if you're Jan Blachowicz. Also mix things up like grappling. Confuse them. If you're Israel Adesanya's corner, it's easy. Keep things at range. Pick them apart. Izzy doesn't have the knockout shot. He's not going to be able to knock out Jan Blachowicz. He's never knocked anybody out. That's not what he does. He picks people apart, very much like Max Holloway. And it's going to be interesting, because I think it only takes one shot for Jan Blachowicz to shock the world. And it's very, very rare that someone moves up in weight and enters as a favorite. It's very, very unusual. It's also very unusual that they do it successfully. It's very weird. Like, it doesn't happen. Daniel Cormier is an exception, but you saw what happened in the rematches. Conor McGregor is also an exception. But very, very rarely do you switch weight classes and have success. With that being said, man, Israel Adesanya's striking is so good. He's done a great job of keeping people at bay, picking people apart, and I see it going the exact same way. I think the later this goes, the more it favors Izzy, and I have Izzy. I don't know if he gets a TKO. I think Jan Blachowicz is super tough, super durable. So yeah, I have him decision, but I think I think it's gonna be very much like the I wouldn't say Yoel Romero. It's probably gonna be a little bit more exciting, but I think it's gonna be. I don't think it's gonna be as exciting as people expect. But I think people are gonna look back and be like, "Wow, Izzy is legit, and he's one of the best to ever do it."
I love that, man. The whole time, every time you give your predictions and picks, I just sit back and I'm like, man, you got a great mind for the sport, brother. So
Thanks, man. I appreciate
I
it.
do have to run. Phone is about to die, but thank you for having me on, though. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, man, for sure. Thanks very much for taking the time. And if you guys haven't, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And also go check out Overtime Heroics. And all the best, and we'll see you guys next time.